Okay, Jesus in prayer. So today's sermon, it's got a really boring title, and I don't know how to get around that. But anyway, you find that Jesus in the Gospels is presented as a pious Jew who fervently prayed, and that prayer was the centre of his life and his commitment. Um, you can see it here. The Gospel frequently depicts Jesus at prayer. This is the case at his baptism. And these things you often don't see until you look for them. You know, they're there, but you just don't notice them. When all the people, I just see if I've got the point again. When all the people were, doesn't seem to, hang on. When all the people were being baptized, Jesus was, I'm going to master this, don't worry. Were being baptized. Jesus was baptized too, and he was praying. And as he was praying, heaven was opened up. Remember that scene? This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. But the important thing is at prayer, at his baptism, he prayed. Okay? And again, he goes into the desert to pray. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone's looking for you." So you can see that he would go off and pray, and then obviously they'd hunt him down, and he'd have to go back to his public ministry. But you can see he was a man who began the day in prayer. Okay, he was continually seeking guidance, and you sort of he has a very strong link with God. And you can see that in the ministry. Like he could say to, I think it was it Andrew or someone, that I saw you under the tree before we met, and that's due, I believe, to the amount of prayer that he prayed. He prays all night before choosing his disciples. See, for the Jews, prayer was 3 times a day. You prayed in the morning, you prayed at lunchtime, and you prayed at night. Now remember, Daniel did that, and they nailed him in the middle of the day, didn't they? And he was defiant. Daniel, instead of hiding in his room and praying, he opened the doors and showed everyone he was praying, okay? He invited trouble because he believed so strong in what he was doing was right and making a statement. So one of those days, Jesus went out to the mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. So these 12 were important. I wonder with that, he deliberately chose Judas, didn't he? And he would have known. And there is a greater reason for Judas. But that's the subject of another sermon. And he also prays over the children. So this shows an encompassing ministry. It's a ministry that's not confined to those who directly understand and have power and influence. It's a ministry that engages everybody. Right? When the people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them, but the disciples rebuked them, Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." When he had placed his hand on them, he went from that place. So you can see he deliberately encouraged a relationship with children as part of his ministry. Before meals, so they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. But you can see that this meal, this is the feeding. There's one point where he feeds 5,000, and there's another point where he feeds 4,000. It's interesting to note that the people were men. Now, It might be that only men matter, so they're the only ones you count. I don't know. I think the truth of it is that the women weren't allowed out in public. So when these gatherings occurred, they were gatherings of men. The women had to stay home. I can expand on that. When the Italians met the Greeks, they both thought each other abused their wives. The Greeks couldn't believe that the Italians would let their wives out into public so other men could look at them, right? And the Italians couldn't believe that the Greeks locked their women up so they weren't allowed out. So you can say, but this is further east than Greece. So while it says 5,000, it was actually, the original says 5,000 men, right? I think the reason is that there just weren't any women in the congregation because they all had to be home, okay? But not that that matters, but the important thing is he gave thanks, and that's where we get our concept of grace from. See, what the early fathers of the church, or people of the church, closely followed these scriptures and applied them to their own life. So that's why we say grace before a meal comes from these texts, okay? And the amazing thing is this miracle that you just keep breaking bread, and the bread would never run out. And the fish would never run out. And you could tell they knew the multitude, how many they had, because they were divided up into lots of hundreds and fifties. So it wasn't, you could just count the number of hundreds, right? And you had you knew how many people you had. So it wasn't like a guess. This figure of 5,000 was, it probably wasn't exactly 5,000. It was about, it's like Solomon having, what was it, how many wives did he have? 300, and 1,000 concubines. Well, he probably didn't have 300 wives. He had about 300 wives. He had about 1,000 concubines. It's not, these statements are not meant to be historical, accurately stated facts. It just gives the accurate impression of what was going on. Likewise here, it might have been 5,120 or something like that, or 4,912. It was about 5,000. Anyway, that's digressing. But you can see with 5 pieces of bread and 2 fish, he fed them all. And that was all through prayer, the power of prayer. Okay. Now, also, the temple was a house of prayer. God's temple was the important thing of a temple, the important thing of a church is that it's a place of prayer. Okay, that's the important thing. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. See, what they did, they made this decision that you could only donate temple currency. So when you came to donate, it must be temple currency. So you had to change your currency, your Roman currency or your Greek currency, whatever it was, into temple currency. And you lost badly when that happened. Okay, so the money changers made themselves a massive cut. You think banks and that are bad, like you go overseas and you try and change Australian dollars and you think, what? Is that all I got? The secret is to change here, get your foreign country and currency in the country that doesn't want it. Never buy currency in the country that doesn't want your currency. But anyway, that's another story. But the money changers made a packet, right? So, and they paid, it was sort of wheels within wheels. They would have paid the authorities who paid other authorities for permission to sit at that particular table and change money. You can see there was this, and again, why is the selling of doves? Why were they selling doves in the temple? What happened if you couldn't afford an animal, you could substitute doves. I got a place where there's an abundance of doves. if anyone's short of a dove or two, a pigeon, you just come and see me. No. So this is so what. But still, when these doves were there, they'd probably be encaged. You bought the dove. You paid a lot of money for that dove, because uh, it was in the temple precincts, and he was angry about people who seemed to be focusing on going to the temple for appearances. I'm religious. I go to the temple. Who were obviously being gouged by the conversion of currency and by the poor, by even taking advantage of them in terms of their substitute gift of doves. And so what does he do? He overturns the tables. It's not like you get this idea, this gentle Jesus, meek and mild, don't you? This is the person who would never offend anyone who's. No, he just lifted the tables up, bang, bang. All their calculations would have gone. All their money would have gone flying. The birds would have probably taken off. It's but what was behind it? What was he said? What upset him the most was that this is what? A house of prayer. That's the thing, that was his motivation. You'd stop people praying by your commercial activities. All who keep the Sabbath without desecrating it and who hold fast to my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain and give to them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. That was Isaiah writing about the aspirations of the temple that was situated on the holy mountain, right? The holy mountain is where Jerusalem is. The temple is on the holy mountain, Mount Moriah. And so you can see that the aspiration was important. The important feature of the temple was the place of prayer. Okay. Now, the other thing is that, have you ever thought, why is it that we can pray? Have you ever thought anything about the nature of prayer? Could God operate without prayer? Could God have sent his son into the world, had his son lived the life to demonstrate a perfect life could be lived, paid a sacrifice for us, and throughout all of that, there'd be no avenue for prayer? You understand that prayer is actually a privilege given to us by God. Follow what I mean? It's not something that, and what's behind prayer? Yeah, it is, if I make a prayer, what am I expecting? An answer. So it is God being bothered enough with us to say, please pray. I want you to pray, right? My temple's a place of prayer. I want you to pray because I'm going to what? I'm going to hear your prayers and I'm going to answer your prayers. You see, it's implicit. It's one of those things you think, oh, well, that's what Christians do, but think behind why it's all occurring, right? And if prayer was pointless in the sense that God didn't hear, there'd never be any point in praying. And the fact that God invites you to pray shows that it's critical. Okay. He cries in the garden, that's a typo cry, so I should fix that. He prays in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his betrayal. That's voice recognition going wrong. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, he said to them. Stay here and keep watch. Now you can see there's a lot of things going on here. Who are the chosen three? Peter, James, and John, aren't they? Now this James is not the James that writes the epistle, the book in the Bible. Okay? This James dies shortly after Christ was crucified. He's killed by the authorities. Okay? So anyway, he overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And of course, going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. Now notice that he falls on the ground. He doesn't kneel. The normal position, you'll see this in a parable which comes later, for a Jew is to pray standing. They don't kneel, they pray standing. He is so overwhelmed that he lies on the ground. He falls on the ground. Abba, Father, he says, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. And then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but what? The flesh is weak. And did Simon fall into temptation shortly after that? We know. Okay. Once more he went away and prayed, the same thing. When he came back, again he found them sleeping because of their eyes were heavy. And what they did not know what to say to him. Okay? They totally missed the whole thing. They totally missed the importance of giving prayer to support him through the greatest crisis of his existence. Okay? That it shows that prayer was important, that Jesus wanted their prayer, right? Those in the church want our prayer. They want our support, okay? Little Rita here going out and selling stuff and that, she wants your support, okay? Susie running this place, she wants your support. They all want your support, okay? They all need your prayers. And so that's that. He believes in the power of prayer. At his trial, he asserts that a prayer to his heavenly Father for deliverance would result in what, more than 12 legions of angels coming to rescue him. That's 12 is just the 12 of Israel, the 12 of the tribes, the 12 disciples, the 12. But one angel wiped out the entire Syrian army in a night, cleaned up killed everybody. So you just imagine what 12 legions would have done, It would have been an awesome display, okay? Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Excuse me. Do you think I cannot call on my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled which say it must happen this way? Now, I found a website with prophecies about Jesus' life, and it came with over 300 or something, like perhaps one day I'll give you a sermon and I'll bore you stupid, I'll just go through one after another until you say, Peter, that's enough. Can we just go and have dinner? But, you can see that he could get out. He explains the reason he didn't pray that prayer and display the power of God was that the scriptures said it had to happen in a certain way. The scriptures way being thing. And who was the person with the sword? Right? And he cut off the high priest's assistant? I've worked it out that, I'm not sure, I think he cut off his right ear, but what he would have done is swung at him, the bloke would have ducked like this, and the sword would have taken his ear off. And I'm not sure, I thought it might have been a left-hand swing, but it's actually, someone checked it. The Bible says which ear went, right? And that person, the high priest's assistant, is named in the Bible. And you know what that means? He became a Christian. Okay? You see, like Zacchaeus, you think, when I grew up, Zacchaeus was this rogue, villain almost, who was converted by the power of God, which is true. But you don't realize that Zacchaeus became one of the leaders in the church. Okay? And the other one is, say, Bartimaeus, who again is down there sort of at Jericho, being healed by Jesus. Matthews, I think, says there were 2 people healed. Luke only talks about one, and people say, aha, inconsistency. It's not. You've got to remember that these Gospels aren't written to be historical records, complete, comprehensive historical records. They talk about historical events. And what Luke is focusing is that one of those blokes, Bartimaeus, became one of the leaders in the church. And usually when someone gets a name, they're either because they're so prominent, or alternatively, they're a member of the church. They become part of that later church. So when Luke's writing about Bartimaeus and Zacchaeus, and John's writing about Lazarus, these people are known. The people who read the Gospels know the people being mentioned, okay? It's highlighting members of the church. And so we have here that Peter tries to chop the bloke's ear off, because you can imagine if your ear gets chopped off and then the guy sticks it back on and it's good, like if that was me, I'd be thinking, oh, look, guys, it's a bit late. I think my wife's expecting me home now. I'll just duck away and let you guys finish the job. Like you wouldn't want to be around, would you? Yeah, if this guy can stick my ear back on, what else is he capable of? You know what I mean? And you can see it had a very profound influence on him. I forget his name. It starts with M, but I forget. It's in one of the Gospels, and one of you students can tell me. And so there are 9 prayers of Jesus preserved in the Gospels, okay? The first one is the Lord's Prayer, and I'm not going to go to that. You know that one backwards. The other one is the praise of the Father on the occasion of the return of the disciples from their first mission. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord, of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those whom the Son chooses to reveal. Now, it's interesting that they sent out 70. Where else is 70 appearing in the Bible? Time of Moses, 70 leaders selected, right? So, and the interesting thing is that Judas would have been one of the 70. Judas would have healed and cast out. Follow? And yet you get this, you get this big betrayal. So anyway, that's the second prayer. Then there's prayer at the tomb of Lazarus. Now, Lazarus is only recorded by John. None of the others talk about him. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. But so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you have sent me. So that prayer was a prayer of public acknowledgement. Okay? And then what happened? Lazarus comes out. Remember, when was Lazarus risen in terms of his ministry? When was it? Just before the crucifixion. Why was Lazarus raised? To give a message. And where did Lazarus come out of? Came out of a tomb. Did Jesus come out of a tomb? Right? Was Lazarus concealed by a stone? Was Jesus concealed by a stone? Right? This is to give them hope that when they were in the gutter at the crucifixion, these things, well, maybe it is not truly the end. You see what I mean? It's a miracle performed, because John says that They came to him and said, Lazarus is sick, near death. And he doesn't take off to go and see Lazarus. And they say to him, why aren't you going? And he hangs around up in Galilee or wherever it was, and then he begins his journey down. So Lazarus is already dead 4 days before Jesus arrives. Now, that means that he has to truly be dead. If you don't drink water, it's 3 days, I think. Is that right? Where's the nurse? Gone. But 3 days and you're dead? Yeah. So you can see that 4 days, Lazarus is, there can be no argument that he's dead. I mean, you get these people, look, these ancient people are really dumb. Things can happen that they don't really understand. Maybe he wasn't dead, but he had some special coma condition and they thought he was dead. That's nonsense. These people knew. These people are closer to nature than we are. Okay, they understand. And then you also have, of course, the evidence of 4 days. Okay, so that's the third prayer. Then there's the temple priest sing, now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say, Father? Save me. Father, save me from this hour. No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven, I have glorified it and will glorify it. The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. So you can see that this is miraculous. And what do the cynics say? Just thunder. What do you mean, thunder? No one was talking. That was just thunder. Okay. And you can see, and what does God say? I have glorified it and I will glorify it again. Was Christ's name glorified? See, the promise. But you can see the response depending on whether you're cynical or whether you are willing to believe. Those who believed knew that an angel had spoken. Those who were cynical said, nah, that's a natural phenomenon. That's on account of thunder. So there's a high priestly prayer in John 17. This is the longest prayer in the Bible. What I've written here is just an extract. It's a beautiful prayer. And what I hope is that sometime you have a quiet moment, you sit down and read John 17. Right? It's a beautiful. The prayer of, so I've actually, oops. The prayer is not, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who believe in me through their message, that all of them will be one Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. So this is a prayer for us. This is a prayer to those who believe in their message. This is Jesus praying for us. Okay? May they also be in us so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, so that they will be brought into complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and I have loved them. I have loved them even as you have loved me. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, incredibly beautiful. And this, this is a prayer not long before he dies. The Gethsemane prayers, there's a prayer for forgiveness of those crucifying. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. We all know that prayer, don't we? And then they divided his clothes by casting lots, as predicted in the Old Testament. Okay, Jesus could have no control over that. The dividing of his clothes, he was up on the cross. There was no way his disciples were going to divide his clothes. The Romans wanted them. They were out of the picture, and this happened, an event totally beyond control of him and his disciples, showing the fulfillment of prophetic knowledge. Then the next one, his cry of dereliction. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, whatever it is, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's interesting that from 3 o'clock, from noon till 3 o'clock, it was dark. The whole place was dark. Wouldn't that have been enough to, are we going down the right path? Okay. Remember, they didn't need to crucify Jesus. Jesus was going to die at the appointed time anyway, right? He didn't die because he was on the cross. He died at the appointed hour. Okay, it didn't matter where he was. At the appointed hour, he would die. So, at the point of death, now it was about noon, and darkness came out of the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he had said this, he breathed his last. Now, do you know that? You know what that temple curtain they're referring to? Do you know what it is? It's the temple between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Behind it was the Ark of Covenant and the Shekinah glory. On the other side of it was the shewbread, the candles, and the other stuff. Now, how thick do you think that curtain was? Huh? No, it was yeah, it was 6 inches thick, which is there to there, which is 150 millimeters in modern speak. Okay, and a curtain like that, you just try tearing something that's, you can't even sometimes tear the plastic bags that they give you nowadays. There's no way that can occur accidentally. And you imagine, as it ripped, it would have made a huge sound and just fell away, exposed a lot. What was the significance of it being exposed? Why was the Shekinah glory exposed? The Lord's sacrifice and offering was done away with. God's glory was no longer in the temple. Up and until that time, God had resided in the temple. The tearing of the curtain, God no longer resided. And the church moved from a church where the presence of God was in God's spirit, as opposed before then to a presence of God in a physical presence. Okay? And that is, you don't realize it, but that's an incredibly original, unique event. See, every other religion had their temple, temple of Apollo or Diana or all the rest of it. They're all places of residence. Suddenly you have a religion where God is not residing in a temple. First time ever, right? Even now, you go to Bangkok Bangkok's more obvious than, say, Singapore and that, because the religion's more obvious, or even Japan. You have the idols presentation of God residing in a building. This is the tearing of the temple, and the movement of God away from a residence within a particular building is incredibly unique. And as you can see, it's a prayer that he prays just before he dies. That his prayer is what? Committing himself to God. Okay? That should be our prayer. Jesus, these are some things about prayer. The first thing is to pray in secret rather than public. He urges simple and direct praying to the Father, not heaping up empty phrases, as in the prayers of the Gentiles. As your Father knows what you need before you ask him. The purpose of prayer is not to tell God what you need. And we use the purpose of prayer to tell God what to do. Like, God, you've got to do this. But certainly the purpose of prayer is the acknowledgement that we are getting God's help to solve the problem that's before us. And you get these heaping up empty phrases. Do you know about the Tibetan prayer wheels? They've got a spinner on a stick, and the wind blows it, or they flick it, and it spins around. And as it spins, that's a prayer. So this thing, and the problem is if the thing spins the wrong way, it's taking the prayers away. So it's just stupidity, just absolute. Yeah, I won't say any more. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. The important thing is that there is reward for praying. Now, if you got a relationship crisis with your employer, with your partner, with your kids, with your relatives, pray about it. And you'll find usually it'll be fixed pretty quickly. Okay? I'm praying all the time about my relationship with my wife. I'm only joking. But do that. When you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them. Your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Okay? Prayers to God for forgiveness will only be granted to those who humble themselves. By contrast, the prayers of those who pride themselves on their moral achievements will not be heard. Okay? Remember this. And then he tells this great parable. To some who were confident in their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I get. I mean, how many of us fast twice a week? Okay. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, who do you relate to in that story? Do you feel that you're like the Pharisee? Or do you feel that you're like the tax collector? Who's the good guy here? All in favour of the Pharisee is the good guy. All in favour of the tax collector. Well, you see, if you believe the tax collector is the good guy, you've become the Pharisee. Right? You understand that? So there is Pharisee in all of us. The only issue is how big the Pharisee is. And if we don't acknowledge that, the Pharisee grows bigger. Okay? Always remember that when we stand, we are like that Pharisee. In some way or another, we've been like that Pharisee. And we've always got to remember not to be like the Pharisee. Okay? So you can talk to me about that later if you don't agree, or never invite me back. It will change. Should pray for those who persecute and abuse us. Forgiveness of others. That's Jesus' prayer. Remember, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgiveness of others is the ground upon which God will forgive the sins of His followers. Therefore, so remember that you must forgive most of the people you meet. After a while, how much? When do you forgive? You've got to, unfortunately, you've got to forgive everyone. Okay? And this is probably the hardest truth when you think about it. That neighbour who annoys you, that partner of yours who annoys you, whatever it is, whatever they've done, that the man in business who's cheated you, that whatever it is, your brother who's stolen your inheritance, whatever it is, you got to forgive them. Okay? Therefore, I tell you, Whatever you ask for in the prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins. Okay? Anyone, anything. Okay? So if you want power in prayer, start with forgiveness first. Start with humility and keep the prayers short. We should pray in the face of trial. Going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed, if possible, the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. Now remember, in a way, not everything, I disagree with everything is possible in the sense that God can do everything. But if God was going to save us in a way that expressed love, he was obliged for Jesus to die. There was no choice. Okay, it had to go. Some things, I mean, 1 and 1 make 2. God can't make 1 and 1 make 3. You see, there's absolutes, and the death of Christ was one of those absolutes that had to occur. Okay. Prayer is not only an integral expression of Jesus' commitment, it's also his expectation of his disciples. Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in the town who kept coming to him with a plea. Grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me. So what Jesus is saying is that if an unrighteous judge will hear a petition and answer it, how much more will a righteous God hear what you say and answer it? Okay? Shows the importance of the power of prayer. Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? No. Hopefully he will. So that's the end of my sermon, which means that it's time for the final hymn, which I think